All right, good evening, and want to welcome you all. I'm Steve Crofter, and I'll be moderating this evening. And just want to thank you all for showing up. This is Democracy in Action. There are emergency exits going out the front door or the doors in the front of the room also. And there are bathrooms downstairs. There's a stairway there in the front hallway that goes downstairs to bathrooms. And Stuart Brown is going to say a few words to get it started.
Everybody, if you want to share the right hand, Democratic maybe us will share the Windham-3. If you want to get involved, find out sheets at the table, both for Westminster and for Rockingham and for Windham County. And if you put in your name and email address, we'll reach out to you and see if you want to do something. Also, if you sign the Windham County ones, we send out a monthly newsletter with monthly events and other like-minded organizations and what's going on during the month. So if you want to just get guaranteed, you don't want to one-off, an email for what's going on in Windham County for Democratic Defense, feel free to sign up. That is why I wanted to thank certainly candidates so but I'm going to thank Steve for moderating, and Laurel, and Deb, and Meg for helping us put this on. And for faculty.
All right. Thank you, Stuart. Yes, so tonight is really, this is an opportunity to participate in democracy. I want to thank Leslie Goldman, who has served our district faithfully for a number of years now, and who's retiring from that. And I want to introduce the three candidates starting from your left, Chris Lundberg, Michelle Bos-Lun, and Stephen Major. And thank you all for stepping up to run for office. That's great. It's really important. The way that it's going to work this evening is each of the candidates will have a couple minutes for an opening statement of their choice. And then they've already been given the first question, which is basically what their priorities are as legislators. And then after that, we'll have a series of questions, some of which our group has prepared, but we're also looking for questions from all of you folks in the audience. If you didn't get an index card or more than one when you came in, just go out to the table there. There's cards, write cards, and then Laurel, are you going to collect the cards? So Laurel, who's in the green dress behind you, she's waving at you. You pass your questions to her, and then she will choose questions, maybe combining questions. There won't be time for all the questions we can think of, but trust her to do as good a job as she can of picking questions that'll make the most sense. And let's see, following all those questions, each candidate will have an opportunity for a closing statement. Yeah, I think that's good just to get started. And I guess one thing I wanted to know is there anyone here from Brookline? Our district, Windham-3, represents Brookline, Westminster, and Rockingham. So unfortunately, it looks like no one here from Brookline. And it's a small town with, less people in it and stuff, but they are an important part of our district as well. How about who's here from Westminster? Raise your hands. Okay, great, lots of folks. And from Rockingham? Yep, so also. All right, looks like roughly evenly divided. So anyway, I think we're ready to begin. Stuart, did you want to explain how the timing will work to the candidates? You did, okay, great. Sure. Yeah, if you have cell phones that are going to ring during the thing, you should break them now. And so, yes. So, there you go. Like that. Thank you Deb, for demonstrating. That's what not to do.
Together, you don't get.
So great. All right. So we'll mix up the order as we, throughout the evening, but we'll start on your left with Chris, and then Michelle, and then Stephen for an opening statement of 2 minutes each. So thanks. Yep.
I came to Vermont in 1973 to go to college and stayed. After graduating, I worked in the machine tool world and then got a job in engineering for manufacturer of equipment. Eventually, one task was to review customer specs and often government specs that were necessary to make sure we met them. Attention to detail was important. I believe my time working with customers was good training that will be applicable to working with colleagues in the legislature. Listening, sharing what I know, negotiating details, working to come to a common agreement, these are skills I have that will serve me well in the legislature. I've been attending the monthly legislators' meetings at the library since they started, and the local Rockingham Democratic Party meetings to see what I might be able to do as a citizen. I had thought about running then, but gave it no serious thought as there were two incumbents I thought were doing a good job, so I didn't want to run against them.
Chris, can you get closer to the mic? Thanks. Yeah, much closer. Yeah.
For a number of years, I've wanted a better understanding of what goes on in Montpelier, and this year finally made 2 trips up for a total of 4 days to sit in committee meetings, both the House and Senate chambers, and a couple caucuses to get an idea of how things actually work. This gave me a good sense of how things work and thought I could work effectively within it. Earlier this year, I'd been encouraged by both Michelle and Leslie Goldman to run because they felt it was valuable to have representation from the 2 biggest towns in the district, and I am from Rockingham and have lived in Bellows Falls for more than 40 years. In short, when no one else stepped forward to run, I decided to. My concerns as a Vermonter are the same as most people: cost of living, health care, quality of education, and protecting our environment. If elected, would be interested in sitting on the Commerce and Economic Development, Energy and Digital Infrastructure, Environment, Education, or Health committees. Also, I'd like to join the Rural Caucus, which is a tripartisan body that meets weekly to address issues of concern to rural districts like ours.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, Michelle. Thanks.
Thank you. So serving in the legislature, I've been in for 6 years, and I can say that there's a very long learning curve. I started to feel really confident and really competent, I would say in about year 4, and Leslie reported the same. It's kind of like going to law school and going back to junior high all at the same time. There are all these alliances, there are all these values, there are many, many different things to factor in. And one of the things that I didn't know when I joined the legislature was relationship building is part of what really makes policy possible. And having been in the legislature for 6 years, I know a lot of people now, and I know people on all the committees, and I know the leaders of the committees. Now, that's going to change every year, that those things change, but those relationships are important and they make policy possible. And so in the last year that I served, which was the 6th year, this 2026 calendar year, I feel like I was more effective than I've ever been before. I'm on this amazing committee, agriculture, food resiliency, and forestry, and we're a mix of Democrats and Republicans and an independent, and we work together to tackle really hard problems that are impacting Vermonters, and more often than not, we end up coming up with unanimous decisions that we pass out of the House, that pass through the Senate, and that get signed by the governor. And it's really satisfying. It feels like we are able to take these complex issues and work together for the best interests of Vermonters. And I really want to keep working on my committee. And I also have some other issues that I want to bring to the table that haven't made it across the finish line yet in terms of legislation. When I first decided to run, it was because I wanted to work on mental health. And I didn't get assigned to the health committee, so I haven't had a lot of opportunity to work on that. But I have ideas for bills that I'll tell you about in my next round.
Thank you, Michelle.
Stephen Major, and first of all, I want to thank you all for showing up, because it's only by having participation that we can have democracy. And so kudos to you for coming out on a hot evening. And I'm Stephen Major. I started here and I'm still here. I won't go into much more depth than that, but that I have served on the Bells Falls Union High School Board for 15 years, for the Select Board here in Westminster for 5 years, also on the Westminster West Library Board and trustee of the Congregational Church in Westminster West. So I've had the opportunity to participate in community and participate in committee governance, and found great value in it. Found the value of serving on the high school board and not even knowing what political party the chair was, Larry Slason, until he ran for legislature some years later. And I thought it was wonderful that I did not know. And I thought that was a great model, and I really appreciate what you're saying about the Agricultural Committee in Vermont. I hope that I could experience similar up there. I'm not sure I'm looking forward to going back to middle school, but Bells Falls Middle School was okay. And what I really would like to emphasize is Vermont governance, our value as a state where we have participatory democracy, where we have a citizen legislature, and where we have town meeting, where we have, true democracy. And I feel that we need to respect that level of participation and also of direct involvement, that people closest to the issue, whether they are on the local school board, local conservation commission, may be those whose the issue matters most to and need to have their input at anything Montpelier does. So I'm looking forward to helping translate that democracy to Montpelier as well. Lastly, I would want to say that much as I like to work together, I do have a strong feeling that we must resist much of what is coming out of Washington right now. In particular, I know Michelle feels similar, thank you, the ice masking. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next question is one which the candidates were told ahead about, and it's simply just make sure I get the right one here. What are your priorities as a legislator that you would most want to pursue and why? And we're going to start with Michelle and then Stephen and then Chris. So good.
Okay. So I have actually 3 legislative priorities that I personally want to help move forward. There will be other things I want to support in the whole body, but as my personal priorities, the first priority that I have is resubmitting legislation about mental health and preparedness for our police officers. We had a shooting a year ago that ended up in the loss of life of a new resident of Putney, and I worked closely with the family to understand what went wrong. And one of the things that went wrong is Vermont is tied for the lowest level of mental health training hours for our police officers with several other states. We have 8 hours. That's how many hours people have in mental health preparation and de-escalation. And my bill would increase it to 15, which is the national average. Not enough, but certainly would help to make our officers better prepared and hopefully would help us prevent future tragedies. So that's my number one priority, to get that bill to protect our Vermonters, because we've lost a person almost every single year for the last 50 years, and every single time it's always found justified. But you know what? I don't think the police really want to kill those individuals either. They were called on to help, and we need to give them the skills so that they can really help, because sometimes they do show up instead of the crisis team or the mental health social workers. Second and third thing I'll lump together quickly because I have 30 seconds, are bills that are likely to come to my committee. One of them is a food is medicine bill, working on preventative health care through making fresh Vermont foods available to Vermonters. We have a pilot project that's working really well that needs to be expanded. Third thing, rodenticides. We came this close to passing a bill out of my committee. We were one vote short. And rodenticides, you may or may not know, move their way up the food chain and cause a lot of harm to raptors and other animals, and I'd like to stop that.
Thank you, Michelle.
My priorities in Montpelier will depend very much on who the next governor is. So it's a situation that depends. If we get a governor and she wishes to push forward universal primary health care, I would want to work aggressively for that, because I think the healthcare system in this state is crumbling badly. So that would be my priority if we are successful in getting a Democratic governor. Second, as I mentioned, I am very supportive and want to be part of the Vermont governance model, where the ideas come from below, from the towns, and when it affects people, whether they're in agriculture or in education or in healthcare, that a bill is thoroughly introduced and has the endorsement and support of those who are most involved in carrying it out or whose personal property is most affected. So that would be my second priority. And lastly, I would support, and I imagine it'll come forward again, a masking bill for ICE. We cannot have people seized off our streets who are our neighbors and who do work for us, who help raise our food, and who care for our elderly. We cannot have them seized by masked, unidentified vehicles and disappeared. That is not our country. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think Vermont has several high priority issues: healthcare, which of course you've mentioned, and its related costs and provisions, protecting our environment, the quality of education and how we can pay for it, and housing and its costs. To some degree, they're all interrelated. I'm interested in work that Stu Brown is doing on economic development, and will keep up to date on it, as I think it will help in establishing a long-term solution to supporting and building on our local economy. Working on the best way forward is a priority for all of us, but my focus in the legislature to pursue will be dictated by what committee I'm ultimately put on, if elected.
Thank you. Sure. Yeah. Okay. The next question is about affordability and tax policy. The Windham-3 district faces high housing, energy, food, and healthcare costs relative to wages. What specific policies might you advocate for to reduce the cost of living, and how would they be funded? And we'll start with Stephen, and then Chris, and then Michelle.
So affordability is a complicated issue. It's both what goes out and what comes in. Do you have adequate income to afford what you want? And then how are you managing monies that go out to taxes versus money that goes out to healthcare and housing? Clearly, the state can do much for helping housing and has already started. The Windham-Windsor Housing Trust has been leapfrogging in adding new housing units to the area, but I understand that there is trouble financing more at this point because the state is not investing enough in housing. So further investments in affordable housing are paramount. And then from affordability point of view, certainly universal primary health care would be a great boon to many families, particularly families with small children. And so I would say that is something I would support as well. Otherwise, I would certainly want to shepherd our resources carefully as we spend tax dollars.
Great, thank you. Okay, and let's see, Chris. Yeah.
Well, I know that they've proposed a 1% tax on the highest wage earners, which I certainly agree with. I think that would be a big help. Beyond that, I don't have any short-term solutions. I think the solutions are going to, the solutions will
Oh, that's
be,
better. Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing.
solutions will be longer term. I think it's all tied to, we have an aging population here. We have a younger population that's moving away. We really do need to do something about bringing in some business and more people to pay taxes and buy housing. We need to build more housing, but we also have a shortage of carpenters. So we need training as well. So it's all interrelated. Healthcare is one reason why people may not want to move here. If you have very few hospitals and you have to go a long way to get any healthcare. So it's all tied together, and it's a long-term solution.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
I actually had jotted a note down to myself. 1% was the first thing that I was going to say. I actually was one of the people that was pushing very hard for a tax on the 1%, which, depending on where we draw the lines, how we define that, could bring in as much as $100 million a year that would help our revenues. And we desperately need more sources of revenue without raising taxes on the Vermonters that are already suffering from their property taxes. So I think that's a must do, and I think that's something that has to happen next year. Beyond that, though, that's not going to solve all of our problems. There are some policy changes we could do that actually would help with some of these other issues without costing a lot of money. For example, within housing, we actually passed legislation within the House, which was partly requested actually by Windham and Windsor Housing and other housing providers and landlords, which was making it possible for bad tenants, not just somebody who's having a hard time paying the rent, but somebody who's violent, somebody who's dealing drugs, somebody who's being abusive in their apartment. Trying to get these people out of the apartments is almost impossible for landlords. And the legislation that we passed, it looked at all different sides, but one of the sides was, how can you move bad tenants out without having it be a 4 to 6 month legal process that probably costs about $10,000. And if we could do that, that helps to make the rental market less risky for people. What we have in Bellows Falls, what we have in Westminster, are a lot of small size landlords. Somebody that owns an apartment and they have 3 units. There are some that have more than that, but there are many people that only have a few. And a lot of them want to do short-term rentals because short-term rentals are less risky. And so I've always been a supporter of keeping people housed, and yet in the case of tenants who are causing disruptions within their properties, we have to make it easier for landlords to move those people out, because otherwise we're going to continue to have this shortage without enough properties for people to live in on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Thank you. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience, if you have questions that are coming to mind, please write them and wave them for Laurel to get, or pass them to the left and Laurel will collect them. So otherwise they'll all be our questions instead of yours. So great. Okay, so this next question, we will start with Chris and then Stephen and then Michelle to finish up. This is about climate. So this week we're experiencing several days with daytime temperatures over 90 degrees and overnight lows in the 70s. As a public servant, how would you take action on behalf of your constituents in relationship with this heat wave, and or the climate? So good. Chris. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Could you repeat the question? I want to make
Yes.
sure I got it right.
Yeah, just in terms of the heat wave, and which is climate related, what actions, as a public servant, as a legislator, what actions might you take to help support people?
Help support people. I don't have a ready answer for you. Sorry.
Okay, good, okay. I don't know if you wanted to speak just to the climate issue or,
It's certainly an issue. And
okay. All right, thank you. And going to Stephen next.
Yes, climate is a huge issue, clearly, and Vermont is vulnerable as many other areas. This is a global problem. If the Gulf of Maine has already increased in height 15 centimeters, that's an enormous issue for Maine, but it's also increased in warmth about 6 degrees Fahrenheit in the water, which makes our weather much different here as we are very much impacted by the ocean. And I have been making maple syrup from maple trees on our farm, same trees, since about 1968. A small number of trees to start with, and now up to 400 or so. So not a big operation, but I know the same trees from that whole length of time. And I've also seen how in my teenage years, we had to clear the pastures when they come in with maple saplings. They don't grow maple saplings anymore. There's no baby maple trees. There is buckthorn, there is multiflora rose growing where there once were little maple saplings. And so I, as a sugar maker, fear the global warming and climate change. But I'm just that's just a microcosm of the whole problem, which affects where you can graze animals and all. So I feel that Vermont can't do it all by itself, but we need to stand as an example. So if we have to have anti-idling rules that prevent trucks from idling, people's starters do work, and we can have trucks not idling. We can forcibly encourage more green energy in the state so that we can approach 100% fossil fuel-free energy in a decade or so. So that's what I feel on that issue.
Great, thanks. And Michelle.
Yeah, so in terms of climate issues, this is certainly an area that I care a lot about. It's not an area that I have a lot of expertise in. That said, I have been a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus for the last 6 years, and I'm actually going to be the co-chair, if I'm reelected, in the next biennium. I care a lot about our environment. I care about our water. I care about our air. I pay attention when legislation comes up. It rarely comes to my committee. Occasionally we'll get water-based bills in my committee. But on the House floor, we vote on everything that comes through. And so we've had sustainable energy votes. We've had bills about all kinds of different issues that could impact climate. I always support those. I have 100% voter approval rate from Vermont conservation voters who assesses the voting record of legislators and if we're supporting or not supporting things that could move forward. As Stephen alluded to earlier, what we can really do in the next biennium is going to be determined to a very large part by whether or not we're able to get one of our Democratic candidates into the governor's seat. Because we had some excellent climate policy that passed in the last biennium, and the governor vetoed a good bit of it. He vetoed our bill to try and prevent data centers, which would be very damaging to our state. He vetoed our bills, I think every bill that we've put in about sustainable energy, with the exception of portable solar, which actually is a really great idea. And so one thing that I can do and have done as a legislator, not serving on a committee of jurisdiction, is I'll share information when I hear about things. So I'm telling you right now, there's a new policy. You can get portable solar. If you don't want to pay and have all the panels put on your roof, you can get an apartment size one and plug it in, and voila, suddenly you've got solar. It's kind of amazing. And there are other ways, even through social media, where I can share, hey, I just got a mini split and I got a refund from Efficiency Vermont. Check it out. And sometimes people do.
Thanks. Okay, for this next question, we'll start with Stephen, then Michelle, and then Chris. Housing is often pitched against environmental stewardship. How can we best address both issues without pitting them against each other?
First of all, housing should not be pitched against environmental stewardship. We do want to group housing into areas where there are services, where there is public transport, where there is water and sewer. But we do need places for people to live, and people to live who want to work here. So we need to have housing. We need to focus our housing on those who need it most. We do not need to promote only high-income housing, which is, of course, the most profitable housing to build. We need to have housing that is affordable. And I believe strongly that there is no competition between providing housing and providing a sustainable environment in our state.
Thank you.
Am I next?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Michelle.
Yeah. So in terms of housing and environmental stewardship, they can be in conflict. They also can be complementary. So one of the organizations in our state that does really amazing work is called the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. And they do work both in conservation and in developing housing, often with existing properties and sometimes starting with new ones. But around the state, there are all kinds of examples where people take large housing, break it into smaller housing, and suddenly an old rundown building can be revitalized and utilized by multiple people under different circumstances in an updated space. And doing those kind of changes, the state actually can support that. There's a state program that will offer up to $50,000. If somebody living on Atkinson Street has a giant house and it has 2 stories and 6 bedrooms, they can break it into 2 apartments and they'll get $50,000 from the state, because the cost of building an individual unit with an organization like Windham and Windsor Housing is about 3 or 4 times that. So it's really a wise investment for the state to put in small amounts of funding for these places where housing is already existing and can be adapted. That said, the legislature has made some attempts to try and find ways that we can also utilize properties that are maybe not in the city centers. And so, for example, a couple of years ago, we passed legislation so that anyone who had a homestead was eligible to either have a duplex or an accessory dwelling unit. So suddenly you have twice the housing capacity that you had before. There were places around the state that zoning laws didn't allow that. I think Westminster was actually one of them. And you know what? My son lives on my property in a tiny house because he couldn't find an apartment when his landlord wanted his apartment back. So this is a real issue, trying to find places where we can build that are going to not be disturbing the environment too much, but utilizing the space that we have already. And I do really believe that what the legislature has moved forward with the idea of, oh, sorry, my time is up. Focusing on city centers where you have sewers and water really does make sense.
Okay, Chris.
Well, I agree with Michelle, but there are certainly in Bellows Falls a number of houses that are large that could be broken up into smaller apartments if people wanted to do that. There's also a couple of large plots where new building could be put in that sewer or water is very close. Getting outside of town some, I could see how environmental stuff might be in the way of people wanting to build, but I don't know why that can't be ironed out. What was it? Was it what, Act 181?
Act 181 was the attempt to balance those two things.
Right, was the attempt to balance the 2 things out. And I think that will actually work out okay. Beyond that, really, Michelle said everything that I could have said.
Thank you. Okay, for this next question, we'll start with Michelle and then Chris and then Stephen. Education. Spending on education continues to drive property tax increases. What policies would you pursue to lower education costs and strengthen academic performances. What method of funding public schools do you favor?
Well, there actually, the education bill that we just passed this last year actually will make some pretty substantial restructuring in the way that money comes to our schools. If it is enacted as it was passed, which I think won't be fully implemented until something like 2030. In terms of what is the most effective way to fund schools, I hope that maybe the model that we move forward will work, which is basically a weighting system where they account for the various needs of each student in each district. And then those funds are sent to the school, and then the school gets to decide how they're going to spend those funds for that particular community. So a community that has more special education kids or kids needing extra care because of living in poverty will get more funds than a wealthy district. So I hope that our model might actually work. We actually have a pretty good track record at moving forward with things that work and that have been a model for the state. So one of the other issues that we passed in our last education bill was requiring all of the districts in the state to join up in some sort of a community sharing of resources, a collaborative educational resource body. And we actually were the first ones to do that. In fact, we were the only region in the state to do one of these cooperative models where resources such as special education teachers for specialized services or transportation or ordering, or, there are all kinds of different ways that you can share resources between districts. And what we found in our district was even in the first year of the model, when we were trying it out, we were able to save money. And of course, we want our kids to be getting the best education possible. And our district is doing a really good job. Kudos, 2 of our school board members are sitting in the audience today, and I was looking at the statistics for the elementary school, and we've risen 10% in 2 years. Okay, sorry, I just saw the red.
Okay, Chris.
Would you read the question again, please?
Sure. This was spending on education continues to drive property tax increases. What policies would you pursue to lower education costs and strengthen academic performance? What method of funding public schools do you favor?
Well, I've had a brief look at 955. I've gotten some information from Cheryl Charles about what she's doing, and all I can say is I'd have to go with what 955 is trying to achieve and follow that and see how it works. And if we need to make modifications along the way, we do that.
You might want to say that was the education bill this year. I don't know if everybody knows that.
Oh, that was the education bill this year that passed.
Great. Thank you. And
I served on the Bells Falls Union High School Board for 15 years and developed a bit of a reaction to plans that came from Montpelier because they change so fast and so frequently when it actually takes 13, 14 years for a kid to go through the school system. So maybe we should change things every 13 or 14 years and wait patiently to see what the results are. I am sorry, I do not support the education reform of this past year. I am thankful to the legislature for not allowing the forced consolidation of schools, but this plan essentially takes away our school district meeting as part of town meeting. It tells us the only thing we're basically voting on is what's our budget. And now, from Montpelier, we are simply told what our budget is. The actual decision on how to spend that budget is within the school board, but the voters no longer have an input on what the expenses of the school are in total. And so I think that is not the best way to do it. Further, I feel that there is a little bit of an overriding gallop against education spending It is true that education spending has gone up per pupil, but we have a lot less pupils. If you look at your education spending tax rate for your own property over, say, I looked at mine in 2008 and 2014, and now the amount of money that is increased in that does not even represent the woodshed I added or the new outbuilding I added on the house. It is essentially our tax rate for education has not gone up in Westminster for a long time. So if we are in a panic about how to control education spending, I think we're looking at the wrong thing. And I do believe, with grandchildren in the school right now, with children who went through the school system, I'm amazed at how much more work they do now than I did when I was in the school system. So I think they're doing well. Thank you.
Okay, for this next question, we'll start with Chris, then Michelle, and then Stephen. Federal overreach is a concern in Vermont. Are there efforts you would develop or support to protect voting rights in Vermont and perhaps other ways of countering federal overreach?
Well, I would have supported the bill that Nader Hashim had championed, which didn't make it through. That required the unmasking of ICE agents as well as state police and local police. Certainly, voting rights are very important. I certainly want to stand behind that and make sure that our rights, our civil rights and voting rights and constitutional rights are maintained. How I would go about that, I guess I don't have an answer for you until I know what I'm up against, and then work on an answer from there.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle.
Okay. In terms of federal overreach, there are so many areas where this is, the federal impact, we actually haven't talked about it all yet. Historically, about 30 to 35% of our budget has come from the federal government, and they have cut huge segments of that out, including from healthcare, including from education, including from other areas. And that alone is a huge problem, but I am hoping the midterm elections will take care of that. So we'll set that aside. If they don't, we are going to have seriously difficult work in Montpelier because we rely on those funds to support very basic needs. But in terms of what can I do to stop the federal overreach, I was one of the co-sponsors of the bill that required people to have identification, to not be masked, and to have, there was a third element that I'm not remembering. But as Chris mentioned, the bill went back and forth, and in the 11th hour, there wasn't enough time. They adjourned before it was passed. Which is really a tragedy because I started the year with that being one of my top two bills that I wanted to pass. The other was my mental health and policing bill. In terms of voters' rights, we passed a really strong voting right bill in the legislature this last year. And the idea was to have it step in where the federal voting rights bill that had been repealed or overridden by the Supreme Court, it was supposed to be covering for that. And so I'm pretty confident that overall our voting rights are going to be in good shape. Sarah Copeland-Hansis, our Secretary of State, I'm really confident in her keeping her finger on the pulse of all the things that are important to keep our rights. The one thing that she can't control, because this is a federal issue, is vote by mail. We say in Vermont, we're going to keep everything the same, and the feds have said they might hold the ballots. Well, if that happens, we can't control that. We can't, because we don't control the mail. We in the state have no jurisdiction over that. So again, let's hope for the midterms and all will be well.
I want to agree with Chris and Michelle that, Chris, you're right. We don't know what's going to happen next. And the next crisis that is going to come barreling at us is not yet revealed. So I think the approach is that we have to be strong. We have to resist the impulse to be careful and worry about whether we get a gubernatorial veto, as there was a worry with the masking bill, or whether it was going to clear the Supreme Court. We need to establish a new normal. We have to say what works here for our state. And the Supreme Court may rule otherwise, but if every state helps establish what is normal, decent behavior, then it'll create a point in the sand, or Ebenezer, as it were, that we need to stick by and say, that is our spot. That is where we stand. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, for this next question, we'll start with Michelle, and then Stephen, and then Chris. And it's about transportation. What's one practical way you might improve transportation options in rural areas, such as Windham County?
Well, that is an area where an individual legislator is not going to have a lot of authority, but I can say in terms of things to work on, what I think is essential is to get some more shuttles that are provided between Bellows Falls or other community centers and places where we can access healthcare. Our healthcare system is struggling throughout the state, and with the urgent care center closing almost 2 years ago now, a lot of people are really left in a lurch, and a number of people have talked to us about that. And both Leslie and I have talked to people at North Star, and there were times where they said, oh yeah, we'll set up shuttles to get people back and forth, and it hasn't happened. And it may be that the state needs to fill that gap, and yet we don't have the funds to do that. So maybe that's one of the places where we could end up putting some resources if we end up doing this tax on the 1%. But right now, basically the way things are in the legislature, if something costs extra money that's not already in the budget, new initiatives are very, very difficult to get funded. But I do think that transportation, if I had to pick one area of transportation that if I could wave a magic wand and make it happen in our area, it would be effective shuttles for people to get to medical appointments from our area, because we're becoming a healthcare desert.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
You don't have to clap every time.
I agree. And I also want to note that our transportation needs are very much on that scale. Much as I would love to have the train stopping in Putney and every little old station along the way, that would be very expensive and very big. And what we need is actual individual transport from Westminster West to Brattleboro or maybe Dartmouth. It is something that we need to work on, frankly, on the cheap, because we can't spend a lot of money on it, but some things don't cost all that much money. Having people subsidized in some way, much as there's small subsidies for things like Westminster Cares, but what about transporting my aged dad, who's 95, to medical appointments? Would be wonderful to have the opportunity for that to happen, and it may take a lot of imagination how somebody gets from Brookline to Grace Cottage, even though it's not very far, but if they no longer drive, and there are plenty of elders in Brookline as well.
There is a way for some people, but there is not a way for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
My dad's caregivers.
Chris?
I have to agree with both of them. I know Mover has some volunteers that will go take people to doctor's appointments or get a prescription for you and bring it. But that's really about it. We don't have much else. It's certainly for not the really rural areas. And so, yeah, having stations somewhere like in Brookline, or people out in Brookline that are on call that can transport people or run errands for them would be something that we could use. I just don't know where to start with that as far as setting it up. Who's going to pay for it? As it is, Mover, I think, is losing money every year anyway. But yeah, otherwise, I have to agree with with Michelle and Stephen. I think they're right on the money.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
I have water.
Chris was self-reliant and brought a lot. That's good. Chris, you were self-reliant and brought a big jug. That's good.
Bellows Falls water.
Thank you, Laurel.
Yes. Keep those candidates hydrated. Yeah. So, okay. So for this next question, we'll start with Stephen, then Chris, then Michelle. It's a two-part question. One is, when did you decide to run? And how will you represent voters in Brookline, Rockingham, and Westminster? So,
I decided to contemplate running when I heard that Leslie was moving, and have long wanted to participate. Coincidentally, my dad was in the legislature in 1971 and 72, and he was a co-sponsor of the bottle bill and the billboard ban, both things that we can be grateful for, and made me think that good work can be done in Montpelier. So I have thought about it before, and it seemed an opportune time. I am also selling my veterinary practice in November, and to my former associate. So there will be continued care for cows in the area, but I will be freed up to be able to do that if I'm not doing vet work part-time. So that was the moment, as it were. And then the next part of the question was... Oh, and how to represent all three towns. Well, yesterday I was busy canvassing or door-to-door out in Brookline, trying to find out what issues Brookline had. And they were very welcoming and very cheery. And it was in the rain, and we stood around and had nice chats at lots of places. I didn't realize how easy this was going to be. They did say, well, we're kind of all quiet out here by ourselves, and like to keep it that way. They did say they went through a reappraisal, which we in Westminster are going to as well, and that their taxes went down a little bit because of that, which is really great news, because it's a very scary thing to go through a reappraisal, because your property value goes way up, but so does the rest of the town. And so being a advocate for the people to communicate their concerns, I want to work with farmers if it's an agricultural issue. I want to work with daycare people, and that is the red card. So working with people is what I'd love to get together, working together.
great. Okay, Chris.
Well, initially, I was asked by Michelle and Leslie if I was interested in running. I wasn't the only one they asked, but I thought about it and decided that I would wait and see what happened. And as we got close to the deadline, nobody else stepped forward, so I said, okay, I'll run. And here I am. As far as serving the communities, I have been sitting down on occasion with people, individuals, to hear what they have to say. Michelle and I have been going door to door canvassing, but I would also continue with the legislators' meetings, which I think are really important. It gets people out and in with the legislators to find out what's going on, and we can hear what they have to say. So meeting person to person, or having regular intervals where you actually are available to sit down and talk with people, I think is really important. And you can find out what's going on in each individual community and help them out as necessary.
Thank you.
All right. So I guess I'll answer the question, when did you decide to run about this time? Because I've been in office for 6 years and I was not planning to run again, honestly. I thought 6 years was enough. I thought I needed to get a job that has benefits. I thought it was long enough that my husband had been supporting us and that I was serving the people, but not serving our family. And then as the legislative session got going, it was January, it was February, and I kept having all these moments that I didn't expect where I realized I really wanted to keep working on these things that I was working on. And I had these moments in my committee where I felt like I was making a huge difference and I was moving certain legislation that was really important. I mean, the paraquat bill and the baby food labeling bill, maybe I'll have time to talk about them later, but I don't think they would have passed if I wasn't in that chair opening my big mouth and challenging some of the people that were giving testimony. And I came home one day and I said, Ron, I have this strange feeling that I should run again. And he said, then you should. So it was like, he made it much too easy because I thought there was going to be a long, tortuous discussion and he was just totally supportive. So anyway, I decided to run because I realized I've got things I still want to do. And it was, I would say, somewhere in the end of February when I made the firm decision. In terms of representing all 3 towns, I have to say that Brookline is tough. I always canvass there. I meet people door to door. we've offered to do Zoom meetings for them because it's so difficult to get there in the offset, really almost all the year it's difficult to get there. But once a year, what they have said is once a year they want us to come in person and do an in-session meeting. And we did that in June. And then I send out monthly newsletters. I have monthly meetings at the library, which I will hope to do with whoever wins. I'm assuming that I'm one of the 2. I think those are really important as a way for voters to have access to us, to give us feedback, to tell us what's important. And and my newsletter is informative. And actually, social media can be a source of information for people as well.
Okay. All right, let's see. Looking at my order here. So this next one will start with Stephen and then Michelle and then Chris. Regarding healthcare, again, this is sort of a 2-part question. What's your position regarding continued healthcare existing within Windham-3 district? And secondly, how can we address drug addiction and mental health care on a locally here in the district?
So 2 parts, healthcare within Windham-3.
Yeah.
And then also tactics for essentially dealing with
Drug addiction and mental health.
First off, Westminster did give a tax rebate to the sojourns down here in the hopes to keep them going. They do provide some medical care right here. Alas, the Bellows Falls no longer has a healthcare center there, and we are stuck with transportation issues, really, because we do not have it right here. There is Leland and Gray that's accessible for people in Brookline, quite nicely accessible there. But in Westminster, it is tough. And I am strongly in favor of the idea of universal primary care in Vermont and hope that we could establish something in Bellows Falls that would fill that very, very important niche for those who do not have transport and for everybody else. We have a current system which provides entirely inadequate emergency and primary care, where people, including myself recently, and my dad recently, waiting 14 hours in a gurney in front of the bench at the Brattleboro Hospital. And my granddaughter waiting 5 days to get a cast put on her forearm with both a broken radius and ulna. It just doesn't work the way it is. So we have to support a universal primary care as a start towards universal health care. On drug addiction, I would very much favor what my daughter would favor as well at Windham-Windsor Housing Trust is housing first. We need to provide housing first and then wraparound services from that housing, because without housing, we cannot address drug addiction.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle.
So as Stephen pointed out, there isn't a lot of healthcare here in Windham-3, so I'm going to answer the question a little bit broader. I think for many people in our area, if you need to go to the ER, you go to Brattleboro. So what we need, at the very least, is to have our hospital be solid and steady. And it's not. Our hospital is deeply, deeply struggling. I had an emergency call with a bunch of legislators today talking about the fate of the birthing center at the Brattleboro Memorial, and they're not sure that they can sustain that because they're losing millions of dollars every year because we have the lowest birth rate in the country and not enough people are utilizing it. But if you don't have a birth center, at what point do you have a hospital when you lose all the services? So we're still working on this. We've got another meeting coming up later this week, and yeah, there is no easy answer. In terms of the other question regarding substance misuse and mental health issues, there are actually some really great programs that offer support for individuals, but they have to be ready to access them. There are peer support programs. There are mental health support programs that are available both for substance use and for mental health issues through HCRS. Depending on the level of challenge that somebody has, there are case managers that are available to provide additional supports to encourage people. If they need to go to rehab, they can help to facilitate that. I mean, there are a whole variety of resources that are out there, but you have to have people who are struggling be in a position where they're ready to get help. And that's not always that easy. But we actually do have a fair amount of resources out there. One thing that I think we do need as a state is we need to have more places where people can go for longer term rehabilitation if they're trying to build a new life without substance misuse. It usually takes more than 2 or 3 weeks, and 2 or 3 weeks is usually what the insurance covers for them. And that includes needing some transitional living houses. We do have some of those. Again, we do not have enough to meet the need. And I used to work at Groundworks, and so many people that I met had been in and out of rehab, and it wasn't enough to keep them steady. And we need to offer longer supports.
Thank you. Chris.
Well, I'd really like to see a hospital or some kind of medical facility return to Bellows Falls. When North Star announced they were leaving, I actually contacted Grace Cottage Hospital to see if they would open a facility there, and they said they couldn't do it because of their charter or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they couldn't do it. I don't know who we could get to come back and reopen it or establish some kind of facility there, but I think it's really necessary. I know Brattleboro Memorial Hospital is having a lot of problems. They're losing millions, as you said. Springfield Hospital's had a lot of problems. I think ultimately single payer would be really nice, but universal primary care, what you were talking about, is a great first start. As far as substance use goes, I spent a little bit of time with Michelle, and who was it we met with?
Father Tomas.
Father Tomas. And there are some facilities in town, either through HCRS or other organizations. So I know that there is support there, but I've seen this with my neighbor's kid. You got to want the help before you get it. You can't really force somebody into it. And also, I think usually the 2 or 3 weeks is certainly not enough time. I've just seen people relapse, and I think longer term solutions are definitely needed and need to be paid for somehow.
Thank you. This next question, we'll start with Michelle and then Chris and then Stephen. The vast majority of funding available to create housing is for low-income housing. Is there any hope for increasing funding for middle-income level housing?
I would say the answer is yes. There actually has been funding designated to what's called the missing middle, because often, as is indicated in the question, the funds are prioritized towards the lowest demographic. But we have actually provided funding for other segments, and I think that needs to continue. One of the things that we've started to do just in the last year in the legislature was to consider the possibilities of mobile homes or mobile home units as a more permanent living space. Historically, if you wanted to buy a mobile home, you couldn't get a loan from a bank. We changed that this year. We also did some other things in terms of financing to make it easier for people to get into a mobile home, because the cost of housing is so high that many people can't afford a traditional home or a new home. I do think that there are other models that we also need to explore, including things like home share, which might sound strange, but it basically is what it sounds like. Often it's intergenerational living, where you have an older Vermonter, and there's a lot of us, having a younger person come into their house, and then they have some kind of an agreement where maybe the younger person is the one that rakes the yard and shovels the snow, and the older person owns the home, but they're able to stay in their home because they're sharing it, and some of the things that were difficult to take care of are being taken care of by another person. I actually have a friend who's in the legislature. He's actually the youngest member of the legislature. He graduated from Bennington College and went directly into the legislature the following January. And he lives in one of these home share agreements with a woman who I think is 83. And he said his hope is to live with her until the day he dies, which I think is not very likely. I think I actually meant the day she dies. But it's a wonderful fit for him. He loves the experience. I think if thinking creatively about how we can make more space more homes out of the structures that we already have is probably more feasible than starting from scratch making more houses. But we absolutely need more housing. In terms of getting workers to Vermont, we have to have more housing at an entry level, because our economy is going to crush if we don't. I think this is one of the most important issues facing Vermont.
Is it? Thanks.
Yes, I excuse me. I know that the state has passed a bill that now allows banks to give mortgages for mobile homes, which I think is really good, because that can get more people started in living in a fixed place, a permanent place. And they're also the $50,000 credit or rebate. I think that's great idea to get people in larger houses to either break off an apartment or other piece of living facility to allow someone to move in to either house share or to rent. So those, I think, are two pretty good solutions. I don't have anything else to add to that. So.
Great, thank you.
On the issue of middle income housing, clearly we do need that too. And it's an issue that needs to be approached from a variety of fronts, including the co-housing, the housing share. One thing that has come to my mind is ADUs. Michelle mentioned is they aren't just for a child getting out of college. They also might be for an elderly person moving out of their main housing so that a younger generation or some neighbor could live in the main house, and they are now in an ADU. My son-in-law works for Wheelpad in Wilmington, and they provide handicap-accessible, rentable ADUs that can be attached to the infrastructure of a house and allow for that generational transfer, as well as rehab for folks who want to stay at home instead of a nursing home. Another thing that's always come to my mind is when we built our house, Adrian and I, in Westminster West in 1991, we were one of the last homes that the Brattleboro Savings and Loan would offer owner builders to do a construction loan. It obviously a high risk for a bank to lend to owners who are not experienced contractors to build their own house, but we did it, and many others have as well in Vermont. And it is often a financing issue. So assisting the financing of folks who want to get started is a important part, because if you are building your own house and you're trying to fix it within that financing, you'll keep it modest and small and affordable and growable so that you can stay there. Thanks.
Okay, this will be the last question before the candidates get to make a closing statement. And the question is, not that you get a choice, but if you could choose any committee assignment, which committee would you choose and why? And we'll start with Chris, and then Stephen, and then Michelle.
Probably commerce and economic development, because I think that works along the lines with some of the work that Stu Brown is doing, which I think is pretty valuable for.
I'm having trouble hearing. Sorry.
Commerce and economic development, or what's the other one? Oh, energy and digital infrastructure would be the two that I'd be interested in. Commerce and economic development, in large part because we need this. We need to develop more business, have people coming in, develop more housing and infrastructure to spread the tax base, for one. But Stu Brown's doing some interesting work, and I think that fits right in with that particular committee.
Thank you. Stephen.
I'm glad that I would be coming in as a freshman legislature and would not get priority, because Michelle really likes her agricultural committee, and she's doing great work there. But as a large animal veterinarian who's been serving the people who work in farming and forestry over the past 38 years here, I clearly have an interest in that. That said, I have other interests as well. So if I am bumped out of agriculture by somebody who really wants it, I would be very happy to serve on issues of education or health.
Okay. Thank you. And Michelle.
So the speaker determines the committee assignments. So there's no guarantee just because I like a committee that I will be placed back there. But I certainly hope that I will be returned to the Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry Committee. I was, for 4 years previous to that, I served on corrections and institutions. And it was a very different dynamic and not collaborative, very top-down. The dynamic was very, very different. In the Agriculture Committee, we work as a cooperative team. We listen to each other. We have differences, but we work through them until we get to agreement in almost every case. And I really value that experience, but I also value the content that we're spending time on. The majority of the time in our committee is on food and farm issues. We're looking at how can we sustain having farms in Vermont, because every year, probably every day, farms are closing, and we want to support farms both from dairy industry to small fruit and vegetable farmers. And we're losing a lot of farms. There are some small farms that are starting up, but many of them don't make it very long because it's a hard business to last in. So we can do things that can meet both farm and food needs. Like example, I presented a bill called Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. And it's a program that's been running for several years, and we put it into statute, so it should be in the budget every year. And basically what it does is it allows, it takes funds, gives them to the food bank. They contract with a variety of farms and food banks, and they make a match. So people that are raising a bunch of vegetables will give their produce to the food bank, and then people go to the food bank, and instead of just getting non-perishable food staple items, they can get fresh food, which, as I was talking about with the food is medicine, it's so important. And I love being able to help support people getting their basic needs met with food and supporting farmers to produce that for us. So I hope I get to keep doing that. And then Mike, I was you there.
Okay, and now we'll have a chance for, yeah, you all got a turn, yes. Yeah, yeah, we'll all, a chance for each candidate to just make a closing statement. And we'll start with Stephen, and then Chris, and then Michelle.
Pardon, it's getting hot up here. I guess what I wanted to say is I have worked on committees with committee structure, working with people across the spectrum, and there can be passionate disagreements on the select board and on high school board. I remember standing up with the striking teachers at one point to the great enragement of other board members. And yet you have to work together, and you have to realize that everybody who is serving is doing that because they want to help the town or the state or the school. So one has to respect their desire to help. I also work with dairy farmers, and not all of them are liberal Democrats, maybe less than half. And yet some of them are great friends. At one point, I was down in Massachusetts at a farm which is in its 14th generation of the farmers, of that family on the farm, bicentennial farm, of course, back to 1684. And I happened to mention in the first Trump term that Trump was a twit, but I didn't use the word twit. And he said, you can't say that. And, you know, he is a Republican, but all his children are very liberal Democrats. So I probably wasn't alone. And yet I did realize he's my good friend, and I work with him all the time. And yes, I need to be a little more polite. So I do try. And I do feel that in Montpelier, I would like to try to work across the political spectrum to understand people's hunting stories, or maybe their snowboarding stories. But anyway, getting the long version also often helps with understanding people. So I guess I hope to get the long version in Montpelier.
Chris.
Me? Oh. Michelle and I have met a lot of Vermonters by door knocking, and a number of people we've met are retired and on fixed income. Cost of living and real estate taxes are a concern for them, and what we can do to alleviate the burden. My generation and my parents' generation have done quite a lot to develop sustainable energy solutions, protect the environment, and champion human rights, but I'm deeply concerned with our current federal government, including our current president, and for our constitutional and civil rights, as well as the generations that will inherit the planet my generation leaves them. Change needs to be made. Some will be difficult but necessary. I can help do this, starting at the state level.
Okay. So I would like to serve for 2 more years for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to focus on, the basic one is I like the opportunity to meet the needs of Vermonters in so many different kinds of ways. Before I was elected, I was working both as a teacher and as a restorative justice practitioner with people who had recently left prison. And since then, I've done a variety of part-time jobs in the off session, working with children in a daycare, working at Groundworks as a case manager. And in all those roles, I'm working with people and I'm helping people. But when I'm in Montpelier, I'm making policies that are potentially helping 700,000 Vermonters. And that's pretty impactful. I can't do that on a daily basis in any other job that I know of. And at this point, I'm qualified to do this work. I'm not sure if I was the day that I started, but we're a citizen legislature, so we all start from scratch. I do have a few areas that I really want to go back to work on. As I had a chance to touch on a little bit at the beginning, I really want to pass my mental health and policing bill to protect vulnerable individuals when they're having a mental health crisis, and to help our police force be more prepared to handle effectively those situations without a tragedy resulting. I want to go back and work in my committee on issues like food as medicine, where you provide food to citizens as they're going to the not the grocery store, if they're going to the clinic. Sometimes they actually get a membership in a CSA and the food is delivered to them. But when they have these pilot programs, we've had 4 of them so far, they find that hospitalization rates go down when people have access to these kinds of foods. And in the end, it's going to save us money. It's going to save us money, and we're going to have healthier Vermonters. And I really think if we're going to tackle our healthcare issue, one of the things is making sure our hospitals stay afloat and we can get enough doctors and nurses to serve. But we also need to help make our population more healthy. And food as medicine is a start for that.
All right, I want to thank the candidates. I want to thank Fact TV for providing the sound system this evening and recording it. And I want to thank Butterfield Library. Thanks to all of you for attending. Don't forget to vote in the primary on August 11th and in the general election in November. Remind all your friends and neighbors to vote as well. And let's give one more round of applause to all the candidates.